Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Jessica Josephine. Hey, Jessica.
Hi,
So happy
happy
to
to be
have you
here.
on. Yeah. And just so people can know you, I'm going to read your short bio. So, Jessica Josephine of Hourglass Astrology combines ancient wisdom with contemporary insights to reveal the developing story of your life. Clients rely on her intuitive guidance for clear and memorable insights they return to again and again. Drawing on her unique blend of expertise in human intelligence, the elite business of AI technology, and archetypal symbols, Jessica will show you exactly how to achieve the healing transformation you've always dreamed of. Jessica received her doctorate of cognitive science from Northwestern University and works with clients in person in the Bay Area and Los Angeles and virtually all over the world. So I know you've done a lot of different things. You've been doing the astrology for 25 years very deeply, but that wasn't always your profession. So tell us your story.
Sure. And thank you again for having me. Um, so I was kind of a witchy little child, as I think that maybe all children are born to be. Very close to nature, very close to the earth, very close to their pets and their siblings and their mom and dad and the world around them. And it's almost like they remember a spiritual time from before they were born. So I think maybe all of us are a little bit like that, but I remember these experiences very clearly. And, I had past life memories and I had psychic and telepathic experiences, which I didn't know they were unusual at the time. This is, my adult self going back and thinking about, yeah, what's going on there? But I was an early reader and very curious and just very connected to all these things. So when I was a little girl, I would read the grocery stores at the time would have palmistry books at the checkout, and I would read them all, and I would read the horoscope rolls, and I was obsessed with, ESP and UFOs and reading all of these things. And, I also, since I was such a reader, I read, in addition to Bible stories, which are ancient, beautiful archetypal stories as well that carry a lot of meaning, and the Greek myths and fairy tales, European fairy tales, like all of these stories I just read and read and read. And so it probably wasn't until I was a young teenager that I really got exposed to what a horoscope is. And, for many people, it's when they become curious about others. It's like, what makes that person tick? So probably a boy that I was in love with when I was a teenager. And I thought, I need to learn how to read his horoscope so that I know all about him. And I just became more and more curious. So this was just something that I developed as a hobby, almost an obsessive hobby. And there's a lot of complexity to it. There is a lot of astronomy to understand. And, I just uh, deepened my learning over the years. And then in the early 2000s, I realized as I think the blogosphere expanded, a lot of my learning had been from books. And then in the early 2000s, there was so much information on websites and on blogs, and I could read what other astrologers wrote and connect with them and then get my first reading and take my first classes and learn. And today in 2025, there are actually a number of universities and professional programs that have very good learning curriculums and are really intense. And you can even earn a degree in astrology from some institutions. But when I was learning, this wasn't the case. So we really learned in a very Socratic way by doing one-on-one mentoring with a given astrologer or reading everything that a given author wrote. So I learned all this, and I kind of wonder where I found the time because I was also studying for a PhD in first language acquisition or infant language acquisition. And that's why I refer to it as human intelligence, because our ability to speak and understand language is what makes humans different from all other creatures. And I was always fascinated by language. So, I was doing science. I was doing, laboratory-based psycholinguistics experiments with babies. And so I don't know where I found all of the time, but when something you're really passionate and interested about, you find the time.
Mhm.
So I developed this interest over years, and I don't think that I really, and then after I graduated with my PhD, I moved into building software, really the precursor to what we think of as AI technology before. So natural language recognition and processing. So I moved into the tech field after I got my degree and was too busy to think about doing astrology professionally. And I also felt that there was inherent conflict, at least in coming out, talking about it publicly. But it clearly isn't impossible for these types of knowledge and interest to exist within one person who wears these hats. So I think it was probably my own development and maturity that by the time 2018 came around, I suddenly just had an inspiration. It literally hit me in the middle of the night. And my sister had gifted me an antique hourglass,
Oh,
and it was something about like looking at the hourglass, and then I drew an oracle card that was literally hourglass.
oh, wow.
And I somehow that all sparked something within me, and I thought, this is the sign. And I had a vision for how I wanted to work with people that I think is unique about me, and I'm happy to talk about more. But this was at a time not so long ago when, after having this very technology focused, digitally based career, which for much of that time, I was sitting just like you and I are now at a screen. Even before we had, streaming video meetings to connect with each other, I was working remotely. And I felt that my entire life had been flattened into a laptop.
Mm.
And I was really suffering. I became sick, actually, chronically ill at that time. And I sort of believed maybe it has to do with this digital existence that I'm living, where I never leave the screen. I don't take care of my body. I don't breathe fresh air. I don't get to spend time face to face sharing the energy of other people. So when this vision for Hourglass came to me, I thought people will become tired and drained from this online existence, and they will crave in-person connection.
Mhm.
And, funny enough, when I finally worked on the business plan for my business and the branding and meant to get started, and my original plan was to only work with people in person and only work with people who had some kind of a connection to me, and launched my business in late 2019. Well, then what happened? The world shut down a few months later, and we were very much, um, deferred from being with each other in person. And that delayed really me leaning into my business as well. And here we are 6 years later, almost 6 years later, and the time, I think, has naturally come back around for me to have the capacity to help other people in the way that I was meant to, because I still had to go through a healing journey myself. So in the past 5 years, and we all suffered through the pandemic. And for me, the shape that that took was a painful separation, a divorce, the necessity of returning to the tech career, which has been very generous to me, but also due to my illness was very draining. It was very taxing.
Mm.
It took away a lot of the energy that I had to give to my son during that time, but I had a commitment to do that. And I also embarked on finding out what was wrong with me illness wise.
Mm.
And lo and behold, in 2025, finally reached a point in my wellness journey to where I have a diagnosis and I have a plan for how to remain healthy and how to make sure I'm healthy for the rest of my life. And also, I made a decision this year to finally leave that career, or at least take a break from the nature of, the full-time corporate lifestyle career that has been good to me and provided all the experiences that I have to share with people, a connection to the types of founders and business executives that I work closely with so that we have shared domain expertise and shared understanding. Um, but it wasn't healthy for me to use my energy in that way. So even though I was so disappointed about the delay in launching my vision for Hourglass at that time, I feel that it developed right on time because here we find ourselves in late 2025, and already I've had a number of new clients just magnetized to me because they're now undergoing the types of astrological challenges and transits that I was undergoing a few years ago. And so it's really been just eye-opening to me and humbling to me. That it was like I had a vision, I had a desire to help, and I had this picture of the way that I would be able to help people. But the reality is, it was an early vision. I
Mhm.
had to get to a place where I am healed enough
Mhm.
that now naturally people are coming to me for me to support them. And I would not have been able to do as good of a job without that journey of the past 5 or 6 years of bringing myself to a healthier place. And so it's true that I'm someone that makes meaning out of the passage of time. That's what astrologers do. We decorate time.
Mhm.
We make stories out of the time that's passing. Oh, isn't that amazing? So naturally, I would feel that way.
Mhm.
But I am still astonished and humbled at the way that it has unfolded so that I am ready to serve and support right at this moment.
That makes so much sense to me when you were talking about, you went through that before you could actually start officially helping
Yes.
people. And I remember I was going through a health challenge a few years ago, and I said, why am I having, God, why am I having this? And they're like, because I want you to be empathetic and I want you to understand how it feels. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, but it doesn't feel good. But some things are just necessary
they
for
are.
your evolvement, if you will.
Yeah. And knowing my own astrology was so pivotal to me doing the healing where it wasn't all explained. I had to do a lot of sleuthing, a lot of meaning making, a lot of connecting the dots for me to understand what my therapist was telling me, for me to try to find clues for what the doctors were or were not telling me. And the horoscope gives so many clues to that, to understand yourself better. It's like a treasure map of your psyche. But it's not just spelled out. It requires uh being very quiet, tuning in to the music. I was saying to you that a horoscope is like the sheet music of the song that was playing when you were born. And you have to listen carefully to it and try to interpret the meaning. It's not so obvious, especially when it's yourself. So I was doing this work myself, also supported by, I would speak to my own astrologers and healers and my therapist and other people and coaches, just as I coach people now. So I had great support and insight. But you probably know,
Mhm.
doesn't matter how great the advice someone gives you or how wise their insight is. At the end of the day, it's your job. No one else can make sense out of that and integrate it into your body in a way that it changes you, that
Mhm.
you can work with. It's on you at the end. And I'm so happy to be able to talk about this now because if I can do this, and I was supported by wise people who tried to tell me stories, and they used my horoscope
Mhm.
to help me understand the story of my life. And now that I know how powerful it is, it's really not surprising. I have a 12th house moon, and without going deeply into what that is, your moon represents your emotional state and your emotional body.
Mhm.
And this is the point that I wanted to make, Kimberly, is part of the philosophy is astrology, the kind of astrology that I want to connect with people on is very much about being in your body. And I had survived so much unprocessed trauma that at one point I perceived I wasn't really in my body. As a matter of fact, I even almost had a perception that I was floating about a foot and a half above my body, like a hologram that's just like slightly off. I'm like, I think I'm up here. And that's because it didn't feel good to be in my body. You
Mhm.
said, sometimes these experiences don't feel good. I was sick, I was processing trauma and heartbreak, and being in my body wasn't a fun experience. But metabolizing that pain and trusting enough to be able to do things in my body and physically make my body well by, something obvious like strengthening it, lifting weights to become stronger, um, massage, hugging my son, like being very grounded by being out in nature in the fresh air. So lucky that I lived in California during that time because it was so easy to go outside and hug a tree and
Mhm.
touch grass during those terrible times. So with all of that learning now, when I work with people, I remind them this astrology is an earth science.
Mhm.
Now, people tend to look at me funny when I say that because they're like, okay, it's literally talking about the stars,
Right.
and I'm not sure it's the science. Okay, so explain that to me, Jessica. Okay, well, even though it does have the Greek word for stars in the name, the reason it works, and if you look at a horoscope that is a circular plot, it only works because we're standing on Earth. It is about the Earth's relationship, not to the stars. The ancients who looked at our beautiful stars, I saw, we have all this news about the extra solar system comet that's visiting us right now. And, today we have a beautiful full moon that is exactly opposite the galactic center, great attractor. So from our point on Earth right now, if we were to look behind the sun, the gravitational center of the universe is behind the sun right now. So there's like a million, billion, trillion galaxies there. So all of these things in the beautiful sky that the ancients were looking at, they didn't know that the stars were millions of miles away. But over time, as we developed expertise around it, and by the time the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, developed enough astronomy, that's where the science comes in, to understand that the planets moving close to us and the moon, which is right here in our face, um, were much closer, and they had a different type of movement. And that's when they started assigning movement to it and developing the science. So first, the whole system works because we are standing on this earth and we are made of the earth. And it is about the earth's relationship with the sun, which gives the seasons.
Mhm.
So actually, the signs, the 12 sectors, are just literally dividing the 360-degree path of our Earth, turning on its own axis on every day and orbiting the sun. That's what gives us the signs of the zodiac. So it's about being on Earth. And then it was always part of science because even as recently as the Renaissance, the famous astronomers who made many of the discoveries that have expanded our knowledge of the solar system and beyond, uh, there was no reason to watch the movement of the heavens without also interpreting the meaning. So all of the famous astronomers were also astrologers who knew the meaning of what they were talking about. And it wasn't until the Pope, you know, it's a little dangerous. If you have to go for your spiritual information outside what the priest wants you to know about God's will, that can feel a little bit threatening. And so there has been conflict with the Abrahamic religions about, we don't want you to speak to fortune tellers because we want the word of God to come directly to you from us. And so that's the history there. And it was always part of science. The Greeks actually who took the Egyptian and Babylonian learnings and perfected the astrology that we use today in, like the third century after Christ, they were also perfecting mathematics and astronomy and numerology. All of this was science to them. So that is, in short or long, what I mean about astrology as an earth science. And to appreciate that, you have to appreciate the fact that you chose to be born into a body on this earth and honor that body and be very grounded. And to me, that all ties up with wanting to work with people in person. And while there are many gifts, I mean, me even sitting here talking to you right now and you're across the country, we're benefiting from technology and the wonderful internet. And that's a good thing. But there needs to be a balance with, our senses. We need our body and our senses to make sense of the world. And so I like to bring in the sensory element. Like when I show someone their horoscope, I'm like, this is a snapshot of the moment when you were born. And if I look at the moment you were born, it was the early morning. And that is why the sun and the moon are under the earth. And Mars was up in the sky. So if you were awake at the moment that you were born in a cold, chilly December Michigan morning, you would have seen sparkly red Mars, up on the horizon. It would have been really crisp and starry and clear. And Jupiter, which you would have been able to see as well, was setting on the western horizon. And so I tried to give people now, can you feel it?
Yeah.
You feel the cold? Can you
Mhm.
see red, sparkly Mars up there and shiny Jupiter setting? And I'm like, let's feel. That's what was going on when you came into a body. And I always want to bring, we can do some of that here remotely, but actually I'll reach up here. I also, when I started, I really love paper and textiles and tactile, beautiful things. So that's a way that I treat people. I try to be in person with them. And if I can't be, or if I am, I give them beautiful handmade paper horoscopes and try to make everything as real in a sensory way as I can. Because when something is real in a sensory way, that's when you go, oh, I get it. And that's the kind of meaning and connection that I crave and I love to help people find.
Okay, well, you've said so many things. I'm like, okay, which question do I ask first?
I have
I
a
mean,
Gemini moon. I'm long-winded. I can talk.
but I mean, first of all, just looking at the basics of astrology, where it is the stars, it is the earth, and there is that science part to it. And I think sometimes when people have difficulty accepting it, it's because there's been people who come out not like you, who have studied for 25 years and went into the science and understand the science, but because they've had experiences where people are just setting up their tent on the street and say, I think I'll
Yeah.
do horoscopes today. But, if you look at everything, I've had my chart done by someone. It was years ago, but
Have
I
you?
don't even remember what was on it, to tell you the truth. It was when my kids were really small. But it was quite complicated. There is a lot to looking at that. It's not just, oh, this is what I'm doing today and this is what it says today. There's very so for anyone who hasn't uh
Yes. It's
had
very
any
complicated.
experience, it's very complicated. And like you said, not only that, but even once you find those things and you're saying, this moon here and this there, and the
Mhm.
person who's listening is like, what do I do with all these moons and stars and planets? And
Yes. And I try to, I always ask my clients, like, what have you had a reading before? What's your familiarity? Because it has grown, astrology has been around for, over 2,500 years, but in the form that we would recognize it today. And believe me, the ancients have been interpreting the heavens since much longer than 2,500 years. So thousands and thousands and thousands of years of developing this knowledge. It's pretty well tested. Um, but it is very complicated. And what I do say though is that there are a lot of energy readers and the tradition of divination, which is just to answer a question
Mhm.
based on some kind of magical occurrence. You can read handwriting. You can read palms. You can read tea leaves. You can read runes. You can read there's any system in the world, and this all works in the same way that astrology works, which is all energy is one. So you just pick the language that makes sense to you. And I really enjoy tarot. And I only started really working with it. I didn't know anything about it. I just thanked my friend the other day because I met her in 2012 through work. And she said, "Oh, I read tarot." And I'm like, "I read astrology." And then she taught me so much about it. And I started drawing cards every day to try to get familiar with that language. And we would do readings for the same question. She would get the same answer.
Hmm.
And so that's when it really clued me in. So it's not that, other types of, I would say, energy readers don't know what they're talking about. It's simply that the language of astrology is a very mathematical, very complex one with many layers. And so it's no wonder that it appeals to someone like me, a trained researcher. And I'm like very into the data points and very into all the complexity. Um, but it does take skill and experience to take that complexity. And then that's why sometimes it's for divination, I'll draw a tarot card when I want a simple message rather than one that takes this. But this is my language. This is one that has always appealed to me because the myths resonated with me. And I like the nerdiness and I like the complexity. So I just have to be careful when I'm working with clients that I don't say like, well, your Chiron is square Uranus, the wide orb, and that's in the sixth house. And they're looking at me like, what did you just say? It's my job to translate that.
So let's go to that more simplified version now. So, how can people use this to benefit their life? If they come to see you, are they coming because
Yes.
they're having a problem? Are they coming because they just want to understand themselves more? Why do they come to you and what problems do you solve?
It's super interesting that um there's a tradition because really the underlying principle of astrology is that time has meaning. That's it. And when I take a snapshot of the moment right now, and actually I'll look at the chart right now. What does the chart look like right now? Well, I see that the sign Gemini, which is a chatty, communicative, talkative sign, is rising with the moon in it. And here I am having a chat
Mhm.
on the internet. Gemini also loves technology because it's a means for communication. So we're chatting on the internet, and it actually resonates with me too. I'm talking about myself, and I have a Gemini moon, as I just mentioned. Now, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the chart of the moment and
Hmm.
saying something about this moment is telling me what's the topic. So I often, when somebody says that they want to talk to me, I will look at the chart of the time that we meet. And I don't plan this beforehand. Like we have to work with our schedules. That's complicated enough. But I'll look at when we actually come to the phone or come to the screen and we meet, I'll look at the chart and see what it says to me. And more often than not, pretty much 100% of the time, that is what they want to come to me about. And here's an example. I did a reading for a woman earlier this week, and we had delays. We had to reschedule. And when we finally got on the phone together, I looked at the chart, and the sign rising was the sign on her descendant or the Western horizon, which is our partnership angle. And so I knew she wanted to talk to me about love. She wanted to talk to me about her relationships, and she did. She talked about how she wanted to get married and have kids. And the topic of conversation was about her ex. and about new people that come into her life. So the answer is astrology is just a language to map the energy of everything everywhere all at once. So its language is so flexible. I can create meaning or help my client create a story for any reason. It is true. I mean, I think this is just human nature that we come to an advisor of some kind when maybe there's something troubling us or there's a decision that we know we need to make and we're looking for insight. We know something is missing. We need some support. And so I sort of astrology is literally, so these planets that I've been talking about are not controlling our actions. They are merely because, and this goes back to this idea that astrology is an earth science, we are physically connected to them. And, with all of the space exploration that humanity has accomplished, I think we can recognize if we can send a probe, or if we can have telescopes looking hundreds of thousands of miles away or even millions of miles away, I think we can understand the neighbors in our solar system. It's just not that far away.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty close by. They're our neighbors. That's a very distant galaxy out there. And what's near us is very nearby. So we're sort of speaking of local space,
Mm-hmm.
relatively speaking. So I think people are a little afraid that if I read their chart, they're going to hear some kind of prescriptive message. Like, this is what's going to happen to me. It's not in my control. And I really blow people's minds when I say, okay, the planets are simply reflecting all of the energy that already exists. And they're affecting us. But you know what? We're affecting them too.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, because they are us and we are them. And all we're doing is choosing a sign. We're choosing a way to pick out a pattern of energy and interpret it. And another good example I say is, have you ever been at an aquarium or maybe by the ocean side and you look underwater, you're snorkeling or you're viewing under the water for some reason, and it's like you're standing right there, but you stick your head under the water and everything looks different. It's a reality that you weren't aware of. So looking at your horoscope is literally just like sticking my head underwater and looking at the same reality that we know that you know about yourself in a slightly different way. So it's not, something that's controlling your behavior or controlling your actions. You just need some support in telling the story about what's going on.
Well, now when you were talking about, I'm going to look over here at what's happening right now. And I was thinking about the technology. So I'm in the optical business. And when I first got in the business to create a hard contact lens, we would do all these measurements and then we would do all these calculations. And then we would send to the lab the lens that we designed. But now I take two measurements, I call the lab, they put it in the computer, and it spits out what kind of contact lens fits perfectly. So
Amazing.
you were just looking at that. So how has AI and technology made your job easier as far as being able to know what's going on? Because I'm guessing that there was one point where you guys were doing the same thing. You were trying to calculate where things are.
Yes. Oh, it's funny. Well, in the whole time that I've been fortunate enough to be practicing astrology in the 21st century, uh, um, you know, I have the benefit of literally looking at a software program that predicts everything. However, I do have professional certification through it's the NCGR PAA, which stands for the National Geocosmic Council for Research and the Professional Astrologers Association. Now, it's not a licensing body. There's no, government body that would approve you to be licensed as an astrologer, but in order for us in the community to respect each other's knowledge and expertise, we have this to keep professional standards high. Now, to take the tests for this, you have to have studied enough to learn how to do the math to calculate a horoscope by hand and do the math to set the house cusps at a certain place and understand how are you dividing the houses and are you do you have enough geography and astronomy knowledge to rectify where you are on the face of the globe. Thank God I don't have to do that most of the time. But certainly, if you visited an astrologer like William Lilly in England, who was a famous astrologer of the 17th century in England. Now, when he cast a chart, it would take him a little bit longer to do the math. And also, timekeeping was different. So I don't know if everybody knew, they didn't have a digital, universally synchronized clock to tell you when you were born.
Mhm.
I was actually thinking about this when my own son was born, because I was already proficient in astrology when he was born. And I knew from my own experience, from my own birth certificate and that of many others, that most people don't have their birth time right. And this is not unusual because in history, we didn't, like I said, we didn't have these digitally synced universal clocks to know like exactly what time it is all the time. And I was thinking, but as I was giving birth to him, I had my eye on the clock
Mhm.
because I was like, I want to know exactly when he comes out. But even then, 20 years ago, he just turned 20. He's a Sagittarius like you. He just turned 20 years old. Even then, I was thinking about that. I'm like, that was just a clock on the wall with the battery. That might, I don't even know if that was exactly right. How would we
Mhm.
know? Like every clock is set a little bit differently. So there is a lot of math that astrologers traditionally had to do. And now in this day and age, when I go and I work sometimes at events and conferences and public spaces, and it would be a little simpler if I just drew an oracle card or a tarot card to do a reading. But because the language of astrology is something that I enjoy so much and I love teaching people about it, but I can just pull up somebody's chart, on my iPhone now. This is something that wasn't available to me even, 10 years ago. So that's normally what has changed it. Now, how has AI changed it? Um, because I'm also an AI expert, and when we're using the word AI today, we've really AI washed the field of natural language processing. Because when you're talking to a chatbot, that is exactly the artificial intelligence that you're getting. It's text based
Mhm.
and it's language based. So that's how you're interacting with it. Um, and I look for, I'm always looking up things, like when was the Gemini full moon of 2011 is something that I was looking up today. And, you get AI answers. And because they are able to summarize such large bodies of text, sometimes you can get a little bit faster answer. But I just like everyone else who has an expertise and is looking at the kinds of stuff that AI returns on the internet, you get inaccuracies, but sometimes you find the answer a little bit faster. Um, and people do ask me about this, can I get an accurate reading? And the answer is AI just makes it a little faster to reach the resources that are on the internet because um, I learned astrology from a lot of reading information on the internet, as I described, but 20 years ago, and the internet's a little bit different place. So the AI does give you the power to sort of scrub through that large body of text that has been digitally uploaded onto the internet over the years and synthesize maybe a quicker, more coherent response than the way that I had to learn it in a little bit more synthetic way. But I have yet to meet a competent AI astrologer. And because I believe so much in working non-digitally, this is something that I advise on. I have a lot of expertise in it, but my preference, my predilection is keep the old ways.
Mhm.
Keep the old ways. Focus on the human intelligence. And a lot of that human intelligence is body-based.
Mhm.
And that is what an AI does not have. An AI does not have a body to live in, to understand and resonate with and mirror back to you the physical experience of being in a body on this planet, which is a huge part of your horoscope.
I just had one more question. And I've wondered this many times in the past. When you look in your women's magazine and they have the horoscope for the month, and I'm thinking, but how many people besides me are Sagittarius? And are we all going through the same thing at the same time?
Well, here's a tip and a hack for you. Um, so every astrologer that is writing a horoscope, for whatever publication, has a different skill level. And even when they're very skilled, everyone has a different way of translating the signs and what things did they pick out and focus on. So I think everybody has, a horoscope, maybe a particular writer or a particular magazine they read that they're like, I like that one. I'm going to read that every month. So that's already a good sign, because if that writer is pulling out little bits and pieces that you felt resonated, then follow that writer. They're onto something. Um, and some astrologers, Jonathan Caner is one who you might be familiar with his name. He passed away years ago, but he was he wrote for big publications in the UK and was syndicated in New York. So people were familiar with his daily or weekly or monthly horoscopes. He was very good at writing for a solar horoscope. So if you're reading Sagittarius, he had a good talent at writing in a way that would communicate the horoscope for your sun sign. But not every astrologer can. Eric Francis is an astrologer who is one of the astrologers that taught me how to really understand a solar chart. Don't worry about the details of what I'm saying, but here's my tip and trick for you. Find out what your rising sign is. Now, some people, especially younger people today, will come up to me and they'll say, I know my big three. What's your big three? Your sun sign. Everybody knows their sun sign. You know that your sun is in Sagittarius.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's one of your big three. That's number one. Number two is your moon sign. To know your moon sign, you have to know your horoscope. You have to know the day that you were born. And the moon moves pretty quickly, right? It goes all the way around the earth every 28 days. So every 2.5 days, the moon changes signs. So you really have to know when you were born to make sure your moon sign. Now, you were born with the moon in Capricorn. So now you know one, Sagittarius, two, Capricorn. Well, the third of the big three is your rising sign. And your rising sign is Scorpio. And what rising sign means is that's the sign, the circular horoscope shows us the turning of the earth on its own axis. So it gives us the night and day. And that just means that the 30-degree sector of the sky that was on the eastern horizon, the moment that you were born, was a sign of Scorpio. So now when you go, and already I've told you just three things that make you different
Mm-hmm.
than every other Sagittarius alive. And then also we have to look at where you were born on the planet and the exact minute
Mm-hmm.
and the year, right? So you're already different from every other Sagittarius that was born on December 7th.
Mm-hmm.
Happy early birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So the next time you read your horoscope in the magazine or the newspaper that you like to read it in, check the horoscope for Scorpio and read Scorpio horoscope and read Sagittarius too, and take them both in and think about like, okay, which one is really working for me? Because a lot of writers work with the houses to create the meaning, and that's a more advanced topic that I won't go into. But if they say something like Scorpio, you can expect maybe a new source of income this month, or watch out for fights with your spouse. Well, what they're telling you is that there are planets that are moving through your second and your seventh houses. And they do this by turning the wheel so that the rising sign is on the ascendant. So I'll leave that there. But pro tip, if you want to check your horoscope and maybe see if, that writer that you read, how it can be a little bit more accurate for you, check your rising sign. And for you, that's Scorpio. So you get back to me and let me know what the next horoscope that you read for Scorpio and if it works for you, and let me know.
Well, thank you. So I know there's people that would like to work with you, and since you do still work virtually, even though you like
I
to
do.
work in person, um, tell people how do they get a hold of you? What services you have now?
Yep. So the primary way that I'm working right now is as an executive coach. And I do a minimum 3-month commitment. This is because one of my observations during all these years that I was kind of undercover as an amateur astrologer, I was always reading for family and friends that I knew really well. And I observed that if it was someone that I knew over time, and I'm texting them and I'm like, wow, this full moon is really hitting your chart, blah, 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 and I'm building up my knowledge about them, I'm developing the story over time longitudinally. And I just interpreting that friend's chart was able to do so much better because I was able to make, pattern match over the development of time as I built a relationship with that person and I got to know their chart better. And if you think about it, this is true if you work with anyone
Mhm,
one-on-one. If you work with a nutritionist, if you work with a therapist, if you work with a coach, building that relationship over time is going to enable them to calibrate to who you are and give so much more meaning. And it's, I think, traditional for people to make appointments with an astrologer or a reader, just like you said. Oh, I had a reading when my kids were little so many years ago. They just do it once.
mhm,
And some meaning is shared, but like you don't really remember it.
mhm,
And I thought, and just for my preferences and skills and the way I work, I'm like, I wanted to, I'm a Libra, I'm the sign of relationships. So I'm like, I think it's really important for me to develop that relationship with you over a minimum period of time. And during the months that we work together, like one of my clients who just started with me last month, um, I give him unlimited time. So we have a way to work together over messaging, async, and we record voice messages and send them back and forth sometimes to kind of be constantly incorporating information or asking questions, text back and forth. And then we'll have live meetings just like you and I are now, and they can be short or they can be long. And that's because really like working together, first of all, we are humans in bodies.
mhm,
We only have so much energy and appetite to work on digging into the deep stuff. You have to build trust and you have to build familiarity to be able to like get those stories right and really know that we're talking the same language.
mhm,
So that is a way that I've really developed over time from my observations of working with so many one-on-one advisors myself. And I'm like, this is how you really get those crystal clear aha moments. And then another observation, another way that I work with people. So people on a very limited basis, usually for friends and family, people will say, "Oh, I'd really like to buy a reading. It's a very popular present, birthday present. I'd love to buy a reading for my friend or my family member." And I will do that on a limited basis, but very rarely because it's really important to focus on building that relationship over time. And I know if I just give you one reading, I've experienced this myself. You cannot take in all that information in an hour, especially with someone that you don't know well.
mhm,
And you're just going to be like, oh, I don't know. So I do, when I do those kinds of readings, I make recordings because if you listen back to it later, and I've experienced this myself, and even though you're hearing yourself talk, you listen to the recording and you think, wow, gosh, I didn't hear that the same way when I was right there, and I
mhm,
learned something new from it. So I really like to do a more elapsing over time relationship because you just get so much more out of it. And the other observation I made during my amateur years, one time I was on a trip with three good friends of mine, and the three of them had all known each other since a much younger age. And I was on this trip with them and looking at all their horoscopes. And because they knew each other so well, because somebody will say something to you that doesn't quite connect, or you're like, question, what does that mean? And then your friend says to you, no, Kimberly, remember when you did that? That was totally correct. Remember that your friends have context.
Hmm.
They see you differently than you see yourself. And all of a sudden that was like an aha moment for me. I'm like, "Ah, I can read for small groups of people that are connected with each other.
Hmm.
They're going to get so much more because I guess this is my passion is really transmitting that information. Like I'm not here to mystify you. I'm here to enlighten you. I'm like, this is important information that I want you to have and to really understand. And I realize that having your friends or loved ones contextually around you can really develop the meaning. So that's another way that I like to work is small groups or like private parties. For instance, I did one in August where it was a group of um, four moms and their seven daughters who had all known each other for a really long time. And it's not just the meaning, but I realized it's actually entertainment.
Hmm.
So, about an hour into that party, everybody's smiling, everybody's laughing, because not only are you learning about yourself, you're also learning, hey, that's why I love her.
Hmm.
Or will roast each other and they'll be like, yeah, that's so funny about you. And they just create such a warm energy. And this is another reason why I personally do astrology and love astrology is because it teaches me how to love people better. It allows you to appreciate those around you and appreciate yourself. And that's what it's about. So those are um, the primary ways that I like to work with people. So if you're someone who is ready to invest in really understanding yourself, and this comes for people in many different times in life. Um, I just turned 50 years old this year, and that means that I am in my Chiron return. Don't worry about what that means, but it's one of the most important passages of midlife. And we don't have a ritual around it. We don't support people around it. And so it's been very awakening for me to understand the astrology of when you turn 50 years old. There's other really critical passages like 42 years old is a really important planetary passage, and it coincides with like when people are having a midlife crisis. So people, get inspired to understand themselves better for all kinds of reasons. And I do particularly have a joy in working with people the thing is they come to me naturally. I don't have to tell them, oh, hey, you're having a Saturn return. Oh, hey, you're having a Uranus return. That tends to be when they reach out and
Hmm.
they need guidance and they need support. Um, so that will be a reason why people come to me. I'm curious, you said you had a reading when your children were younger. What inspired you at that time
Well,
to get a reading?
actually, it was my friend, and it was just like a printout, and I didn't really understand a lot of it. So she's like, I'll do your chart for you. I'm like, okay. And then she gives me this paper printed out, and I was reading all these things, and I didn't really know what to do
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. That's why it helps to have there's so much. I think what makes it so accessible is that all you need, because astrologers make meaning out of time, it's free and easy. All you need to know is when you were born and where. And you can go online to astro.com, which is my favorite, most basic, a very old website managed out of Switzerland, actually, where there's just an absolute archive of reliable information. And you can go on there and you can enter in your details and you can read your own horoscope and you can learn about it. And that's part of the way that I learned. But not everybody that it doesn't float their boat. So it is useful to talk to somebody who can just kind of cut through all of the detail and
That would
and
have
give
been
you like
good.
yeah, and guide you
Mhm.
if you don't want to reinvent the wheel and teach yourself astrology because it is, I mean, people are passionate about it and It's something that has never really waned in popularity for long. And definitely, even though I've been interested in it my whole life, there certainly have been periods where it didn't seem like it was very mainstream. But I have noticed over the past maybe 5 or 10 years, and there's a number of apps that younger people are interested in. They're like, oh, I have my chart on CoStar, or have you read The Pattern? I actually don't recommend CoStar much as an app, but The Pattern is quite good. So that's just my 2 cents. People have who are curious about it will get to know. And there's so many ways to self-study. And that's why I love astrology, is because it's free, it's ancient, it's time-tested, and it's accessible to you. It's complicated, but there's no barrier to entry other than that. And for a lot of people who, investing in 10 years of psychotherapy, it can be very life-changing. Like I believe in it. I think that it can be enormously supportive, but that's not available to everyone. But everyone has a birth time. Everyone can go cast their chart at astro.com and learn more about themselves. And I'm passionate about like helping people learn more about themselves. And so I like astrology because it has those qualities. It's been around for millennia. It's very true, it's very resonant, and it's just readily available to everyone.
Okay. Well, I have a personal question for you now. What
Sure.
gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Ah, well, I mentioned my son, my Sagittarius son, who he's my only, and for most of our life together, I raised him as a single mom. And I mean, I love to look at family astrology actually. So this is another, nerd topic. But have looked through my own family tree and looked at the horoscopes of my ancestors and seen the connections. There's almost like a DNA of astrology that gets passed down. So I love to look at the charts of parents and children. And as we all know, our kids, uh, we all get born into families where we feel like we fit or we don't fit in some ways. And that's the life that we choose and the family that we're born into, I believe. And I've always felt very lucky that my son and I have have horoscopes that just go like peanut butter and jelly together. We have
Wonderful.
a very easy relationship, a very tight relationship. It's reflected in the fact that our horoscopes have a very easygoing, close relationship. And this would be true even without looking at our horoscopes, but he's just a joy to me. And like you hope your kids are going to be, and we're close. And like the Sagittarius he had to go far away from home to go to school. So I miss him, but he is, that's probably the thing that gives me the most joy is now that he's 20 years old, I look back and I'm like, yeah, I raised him. He's a great person, and I've loved watching, that time that he's been alive. I mean, spans a lot of the time that I've been developing my expertise in astrology. And so, right from that moment when I had my eye on the clock when I
That's
gave birth to him to today, I've watched him grow into his chart. And just knowing that facet of him. And also, I love it because he has to troll me because boys like to do that, and Sagittariuses love to be skeptics. They love to be skeptics and be like, "Are you sure that that's not total horse poop?" And he jokes, he says, "Oh yeah, mom, with your space racism."
that's funny.
He calls it space racism because he's like, "You can't categorize me. I'm not like all the other Sagittariuses." So he's the thing. He gives me the most joy, and just the process of having raised him has been one of the best parts of my life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and for all the detailed information because I learned more about this than I ever knew.
Well, I love to talk about it. I would love to talk to you about your wonderful horoscope. Now I know why you do a podcast. You
Mhm,
love to connect with people from all over the world and
mhm,
have give them a place to share their information because the role of a Sagittarius is to uh, transmit across boundaries, to forge connections over long distances with people of all different stripes, of all different backgrounds, all different faiths, all different expertise. And I can see how that motivates you in what you're doing here and that you provide a platform for people to talk about it, I think is wonderful.
yeah, that exactly describes me.
I
So
guess there's it.
I do have one more question. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Hmm. Well, I think I would say exactly what I've been talking about today. When you know who you are, you feel like you're kind of empowered to just be who you are, to be authentic. Sometimes we can get distracted from who we're really meant to be and we question, like, am I on the right path? Am I really acting true to my nature? And I feel that astrology has been a help to me in understanding who I really am. And even to say, at an earlier point in my life, I thought, well, because I'm a scientist, I'm a trained scientist, because I'm a technology expert, I'm afraid people won't take me seriously if I talk about astrology, if I talk about tarot, if I talk about magic. But over time, I realized, well, if it's true for me, then it must be possible to
Mhm,
have all of these things be part of your truth. And in learning more about myself, I learned that it aligned with my belief that I wanted to know my authentic self and that I wanted to live authentically. So I think really letting your freak flag fly and being who you are is the fastest path to a happy, fulfilled life. And that's what I want people to see. I'm like, you should love yourself for who you are. Look how great this is, you know? And it's true no matter who you are and what your horoscope says.
right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me and letting me talk about something that I'm so passionate about.
We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Take care, Kimberly. Thank you.